I swear, life's got a way of slapping you across the face when you least expect it. For me, it wasn't some slow burn realization that something was wrong. No, it was a goddamn fireworks show of red flags I'd been too blind to notice. It all started on Friday night, when Emma told me she couldn't make it to our son's school play. Now listen, she never missed these things. Ever. Whether it was some awful kindergarten talent show or a PTA meeting, Emma was there. She wasn't the cookie-baking mom type, but she had this way of showing up and making people feel her presence. Always perfectly dressed. Always with that dazzling smile that made you think she had it all figured out. So when she called me that evening, sounding completely uninterested, I knew something was off. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice breezy, like she wasn't about to crush our kid's heart. "I can't make it tonight. Work emergency." "Work emergency?" I repeated, glancing at the clock. "Emma, it's almost 6. What kind of emergency happens at this hour?" She sighed, the way people do when they're trying to make you feel like you're the unreasonable one. "I don't make the rules, Mike. These things happen." "Yeah, sure, these things happen. Except they never had before." I glanced over at Liam, our son, who was already in his little costume, pacing nervously by the door. He kept checking his watch like he was counting down the seconds until his mom walked in. I wanted to tell him not to bother. The play was a disaster. Liam forgot half his lines, and every time he looked out into the crowd, his face fell a little more when he didn't see her. I clenched my jaw through the whole thing, clapping like a maniac at the end just to keep his spirits up. Afterward, as we walked to the car, Liam finally asked, "Why didn't Mom come?" I didn't have an answer. She had work. He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me, and honestly, neither did I. I drove home feeling like there was a stone in my chest. Emma still wasn't back. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was dark. I put Liam to bed, kissed his forehead, and went downstairs to wait. An hour passed, then 2. By the time the clock hit midnight, I was pacing the living room like a caged animal. Where the hell was she? Finally, around 12:30 a.m., headlights swept across the window. I heard her car door slam, followed by the clatter of her heels on the pavement. She walked in like she owned the place, completely unfazed. "Late night," I said, crossing my arms. She looked up, surprised to see me. "You're still up?" "Yeah, funny thing. My wife bails on our son's big night, then doesn't bother to call or text. Hard to sleep after that." Emma rolled her eyes. "Mike, I told you I had work." "Where?" I asked sharply. "Where exactly were you working tonight?" Her smile faltered for just a second, just long enough to make my stomach churn. "Downtown," she said casually, kicking off her shoes. "There was an event we had to cover last minute." "What event?" She froze. Her hand hovered over her purse like she was debating whether to grab it and bolt. "It's not a big deal, Mike," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Can we not do this right now? I'm exhausted." "Not a big deal?" My voice was rising now, the anger bubbling up. "You lied to me, Emma. You weren't at work." "Yes, I was." "No, you weren't," I snapped. "I called your office. They've been closed since 5 p.m. That did it." The mask slipped, just for a moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic, guilt, and then, just like that, the mask was back on. "God, Mike, you're acting like a crazy person." She grabbed her purse and started walking toward the stairs. "I'm not doing this with you." But I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice cold. I wasn't yelling anymore. I was deadly calm, and that seemed to scare her more than anything. Emma stopped halfway up the stairs. Her back stiffened, her hand tightening on the railing. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb." I took a step closer. "Who were you with tonight?" She turned slowly, her face a picture of fake confusion. "You're being ridiculous." "No, I'm not." Another step. "I know there's someone else, Emma. So why don't you just stop pretending and tell me the truth?" For a second, I thought she might. Her lips parted like she was about to speak, but then she shook her head and laughed. A cold, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "You're losing it," she said, shaking her head. "This is why I can't talk to you anymore. You're always looking for problems where there aren't any." And with that, She turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing there in the dark. But I wasn't about to let this go. Not this time. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. Emma thought she had me fooled, that she could brush me off with a few eye rolls and fake excuses. But after what happened that night, my gut wouldn't let it go. Something was wrong, and I knew I had to dig deeper. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Her side of the sheets was cold, and when I checked my phone, there was a text from her. Had an early meeting. Don't wait up for me tonight. Late work event again. There it was. Another excuse. But this time, I wasn't going to sit around like some clueless husband. At 5 p.m., I left work early and drove straight to her office downtown. I parked across the street, leaned back in my seat, and waited. Sure enough, at 5:15, I saw Emma walk out of the building. But she wasn't alone. There he was. A tall, well-dressed man with that polished, arrogant look you only see in people who think the world owes them something. He had his hand on her back, guiding her toward a sleek black car parked by the curb. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Who the hell was this guy? They got in the car and drove off. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was just a work colleague. But the way she smiled at him, the way she leaned in just a little too close, it wasn't right. They pulled up outside an upscale hotel in the heart of the city. The kind of place that screams discreet luxury. The kind of place where no one asks questions. I parked a block away and watched as they stepped out of the car. Emma adjusted her dress, smoothing it down over her hips. The guy whispered something in her ear, and she laughed. A real laugh. One I hadn't heard from her in months. My stomach turned. They walked inside, disappearing through the glass doors. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. Part of me didn't want to believe what I was seeing. But the other part, the one that had been screaming at me for weeks, knew the truth. I couldn't sit there any longer. I needed answers. Inside the hotel, the lobby smelled like money. Polished marble floors, chandeliers that probably cost more than my car, and staff who wouldn't even look you in the eye unless you were wearing a suit that screamed millionaire. I didn't belong there, but I wasn't leaving without answers. At the front desk, a young woman with a tight smile greeted me. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I'm looking for my wife, Emma Carlson. She checked in with a guest a few minutes ago." The woman's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest information." Of course, they were used to covering for people like Emma. I was about to push harder when I spotted him. The guy from the car. He was walking through the lobby toward the elevators, alone. Emma wasn't with him. Without thinking, I followed. He stepped into an elevator, and I caught the door just before it closed. "Hold the elevator?" I said, pretending to be out of breath. He nodded, giving me a polite smile. Of course. We rode in silence for a few floors before he pressed the button for the penthouse. Penthouse. Of course. This guy wasn't just some random fling. He had money. When the elevator stopped, he stepped out, giving me a brief nod. "Have a good night." I watched as he disappeared down the hall. As soon as the doors closed, I pressed the button for the floor below and got out. The hallway was empty, quiet, but I could hear faint voices coming from upstairs. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my pulse racing. When I reached the penthouse floor, I crouched by the door, straining to hear. Laughter, glasses clinking, and then her voice. "Emma." She sounded relaxed, happy, like she didn't have a care in the world. I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on the door. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened, and there she was. Emma. Standing in front of me in a black dress that hugged her curves. A glass of champagne in her hand. Her smile froze when she saw me. "Mike." I stared at her, my mind racing. "Surprised to see me?" She blinked, recovering quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing." My voice was cold, steady. "Funny. I don't remember you mentioning a work event at a hotel." Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought she might come clean. But instead, she did what she always did, she lied. "I told you it's a work thing. We're meeting with a client." "A client?" I glanced past her into the room. There was no one else there. Just an empty table with 2 glasses of champagne. Where's this client, Emma? She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, the guy from earlier appeared behind her. Oh, he said, smirking. You must be Mike. And that's when I knew. He knew my name. He knew exactly who I was. Emma turned, flustered. Derek, don't. But Derek just grinned. I've heard a lot about you. I stared at him, my blood boiling. Have you? He shrugged, leaning casually against the doorframe. Emma talks about you all the time. Says you're a great dad. The way he said it, condescending like he was mocking me, made my fists clench at my sides. I looked at Emma. You've been talking about me to him? She crossed her arms, defiant now. Mike, this isn't what it looks like. No. I stepped closer. Then what is it, Emma? Explain it to me. But she didn't. She just stood there, staring at me with that same cold, distant expression I'd seen too many times lately. And Derek? He didn't even look guilty. He just watched like he was enjoying the show that was my life falling apart. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. Explain it to me? I repeated, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension hanging in the air. Go on, Emma. I'm waiting. For a moment, I thought she was going to lie again. I saw her glance at Derek, like she was waiting for him to take the lead. But he just stood there, sipping his champagne, smirking like this was all some twisted joke. Finally, she sighed and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Can we not do this here? Here? I let out a bitter laugh. You don't want to do this here? What about Liam's school play last night? Did you care about where you were when you bailed on your own son? Her jaw clenched, and I saw that flicker of guilt again. Good. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to hurt the way I did. Mike, I told you. Don't. I snapped, stepping closer. Don't feed me more of your bull's *** tea. Who is he, Emma? She glanced back at the door, lowering her voice. He's a client. A client who knows my name? I leaned in, not bothering to hide my disgust. A client who invites you to a penthouse suite for champagne? She opened her mouth to answer, but I was done waiting for her excuses. I followed you, I said, cutting her off. I saw you leave work with him. I saw you come here. And I'm supposed to believe this is just business. Her face paled. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She realized I wasn't clueless anymore. The mask was slipping. You've been following me? She whispered, as if that was the biggest crime here. Yeah, I have. I shot back, because something hasn't felt right for months, and I was stupid enough to ignore it. She crossed her arms, trying to regain control of the conversation. Mike, you're acting crazy. Am I? I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only sane one here. Look, she started. But before she could finish, the door behind her opened. Derek stepped out, cool as ever, like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't even pretending to be discreet anymore. Everything okay out here? He asked, giving me that smug grin again. You two seem to be having a moment. Emma spun around, glaring at him. Derek, go back inside. But he ignored her. He was watching me, sizing me up like this was some kind of twisted power game. And maybe it was. I have to hand it to you, he said, raising his glass. You've got guts showing up here like this. Most guys wouldn't have the nerve. I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on Emma. How long? She blinked. What? How long has this been going on? I said through gritted teeth. How long have you been sneaking around with him behind my back? Emma looked away, biting her lip. That was all the confirmation I needed. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. How did we get here? Derek, clearly enjoying himself, leaned casually against the wall. You want a timeline? I can give you one. Derek, Emma hissed, but he kept going. About 6 months, give or take, he said, swirling his champagne like we were discussing the weather. We met at a charity event. One thing led to another. 6 months, I repeated, my voice rising. 6 months of lies? Emma finally met my eyes, and for a second, I thought I saw regret. But then she straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening. It wasn't like that, she said quietly. It wasn't planned. Oh, so you just tripped and fell into his bed? I snapped. Give me a break, Emma. Her eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand. You were never home. You were always too busy with work, with Liam, with... Don't you dare bring Liam into this? I said, stepping so close she had to tilt her head up to meet my eyes. This isn't about him. This is about you. About the choices you made. For a moment, the hallway was deadly silent. Then Derek chuckled. You know, he said, pushing off the wall, I've been wondering when this moment would happen. She talked about you a lot, you know, always painting you as the perfect husband. I glared at him. And you decided to screw her anyway? He shrugged, completely unfazed. People like me don't say no to what we want. That was it. I lunged for him, grabbing him by the collar. His smug expression finally cracked as I slammed him against the wall. Mike! Emma screamed, grabbing my arm. Stop it! But I wasn't listening. You think you can waltz into my life, destroy my family, and walk away without consequences? Derek tried to smile, but there was fear in his eyes now. It's not my fault your wife was bored. That did it. My fist collided with his jaw, sending him stumbling back against the wall. Emma shrieked, pulling me away. Have you lost your mind? She shouted. I turned to her, breathing hard. No, Emma. I'm finally seeing things clearly. As Derek picked himself up, wiping blood from his lip, he glared at me. You're making a mistake. No, I said, my voice cold. I made a mistake trusting her. Emma's face crumpled for a second, but she quickly masked it with anger. Fine. You want the truth? Yes. I've been seeing him. But you weren't exactly innocent in all this. I laughed bitterly. Really? You're going to blame me for your affair? You checked out of this marriage a long time ago, she shot back. All you ever cared about was work and Liam. I was just there. You were my wife, I yelled. I trusted you, Emma. I loved you. Her face twisted in frustration. And I loved you too. But love doesn't fix everything. I stared at her, the woman I'd spent over a decade building a life with, and suddenly, she felt like a stranger. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I married. She was cold, calculated, and somehow that hurt more than anything. I took a step back, shaking my head. You know what? I'm done. You've made your choice. Emma's eyes widened. Mike, wait. No, I said firmly. I'm done waiting. I'm done fighting for someone who doesn't give a damn. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I could hear Derek mutter something, but I didn't care. I was done playing the fool. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I stormed out of that hotel with my heart pounding in my chest and my fists still aching from the punch I'd thrown. I wasn't proud of losing control, but God, it felt good to wipe that smug look off Derek's face. As I walked to my car, I replayed Emma's words in my head. You checked out of this marriage. Love doesn't fix everything. Blaming me? After 6 months of sneaking around with some entitled prick? No, she didn't get to twist this into my fault. She didn't get to rewrite the story and cast herself as the victim. But something was nagging at me. A loose thread that wouldn't stop pulling. Why was Derek so calm? Why did he act like he expected me to show up? When I got home, the house was quiet. Liam was asleep, and I sat on the couch in the dark, trying to process everything. My mind kept going back to that smirk on Derek's face when he said, You must be Mike. He knew me. He knew about me. That wasn't just some fling Emma had fallen into by accident. This was deliberate, and I wasn't going to sit back and wait for more lies. Not this time. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was a text from Emma. Emma, we need to talk. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear more of her excuses. By noon, she'd sent 4 more messages. All the same, please, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Call me. I wasn't falling for it. She wasn't sorry. She was trying to get ahead of whatever fallout was coming her way. But around 3 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Emma. It was Derek. My hand froze over the screen. Derek? What the hell did he want? I let it ring. Then, a voicemail popped up. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed play. Mike, His voice was calm, calculated, like he was addressing an equal in some twisted game. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Emma's important to both of us, and I believe we need to have a conversation. Man to man. I almost threw my phone across the room. Man to man? This guy thought we were playing some kind of power game. That night, Emma showed up at the house unannounced. She let herself in with her key like nothing had happened. I was in the kitchen, nursing a drink, when I heard the door open. Mike! I didn't answer. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She found me in the kitchen, standing by the counter. She looked nervous, her hands clutching her purse like it was some kind of shield. "We need to talk," she said softly. "No, you need to talk," I replied, my voice cold. "I need to hear the truth." She sighed, setting her purse down. "It's complicated. Complicated." I let out a harsh laugh. "You're screwing another man behind my back, Emma. That's not complicated. That's betrayal." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You think this is all black and white? It's not. You weren't there, Mike. You don't know what it's been like." "Then tell me," I said, slamming my glass down on the counter. "Because right now, it looks like you got bored of your life and decided to trade up." She flinched, but recovered quickly. "It wasn't about trading up. It was about feeling alive again. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been?" "Lonely?" I scoffed. "You had a family, a husband, a son, and you threw it all away for what? Champagne in a penthouse." She looked down, biting her lip. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." "But it did," I said, stepping closer. "And now you need to own it." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something real there. Not guilt, not regret, but defiance. "You think you know everything?" she said, her voice low. "You don't know the half of it." Those words hung in the air like a storm cloud. I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes. "Then tell me. Stop hiding behind your lies and tell me what the hell is really going on." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It wasn't just Derek," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart stopped. "What?" "There were others," she said, avoiding my gaze. "It started as harmless flirting, a way to feel wanted again, but it escalated. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me." "How many?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't," I shouted. "How many, Emma?" Her voice broke. "3, maybe 4. I staggered back, gripping the counter for support. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, a choice she made over and over again. And yet, she stood there, unrepentant, like she was daring me to judge her. "You destroyed our family for this?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. "For strangers." "They weren't strangers," she shot back. "They made me feel seen. Do you even know what that's like? To feel invisible in your own marriage." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "I never made you invisible. I loved you." She wiped a tear from her cheek, her expression hardening again. "Love isn't enough, Mike. Not when you feel like you're fading away." I didn't know what hurt more, her betrayal or the fact that she didn't even seem sorry. But I wasn't done. "You've got one chance," I said coldly. "One chance to tell me the whole truth. Or I walk out that door, and you'll never see me again." She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes calculating. Then she said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Derek's not just some guy, Mike." Her voice was calm, deliberate. "He's someone you'll be hearing a lot more about." "What the hell does that mean?" She smiled faintly. "He's a public figure, a very famous one." The weight of her words hit me like a sledgehammer. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Famous, public figure. Why would Derek know my name before we even met? And then it clicked. My hands shook as I leaned against the counter. "You've been sleeping with that Derek? The one from the news?" Emma nodded slowly. "Now you understand." Couldn't breathe. Everything around me blurred. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a scandal waiting to explode. It hit me like a wrecking ball. Derek Stone. That smug prick standing in the penthouse doorway wasn't just some random rich guy. He was the Derek Stone, media mogul, billionaire, and one of the most recognizable faces on TV. He owned half the news stations in the country, had political connections up to his neck, and threw lavish charity galas where celebrities practically lined up to kiss his ring. No wonder he acted untouchable. He was untouchable. And my wife was sleeping with him. You're joking? I said, shaking my head, though my gut told me she wasn't. Please tell me this is some sick joke. Emma didn't flinch. She stood there, perfectly composed, like this was all business to her now. I told you, she said, her voice calm. It's complicated. No. I shot back, my voice rising. It's not complicated, Emma. It's insane. You're having an affair with Derek Stone? Do you know what kind of man he is? She crossed her arms, glaring at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Of course I know. I know him better than you ever will. I slammed my fist on the counter. He's a manipulative scumbag. He's been through 2 divorces because of affairs. He treats people like they're disposable, Emma. And now you're just another one of his toys. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you dare reduce me to that. Then what the hell do you want me to call it? I snapped. Because that's exactly what you are to him. A distraction. Something to use and toss aside when he's bored. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You don't know anything about us. The word sent a chill down my spine. She was talking about them like they were some kind of couple. Like their little secret world mattered more than the life we'd built. There's no us, Emma, I said through gritted teeth. You're a married woman with a child at home. You're supposed to be our family, not his. She didn't back down. Our family hasn't felt like a family in years, Mike. And you know it. I stared at her, stunned. So that's your excuse? That things got hard, so you just gave up? You ran straight into the arms of a man who could ruin us. Emma rolled her eyes, like she was tired of the conversation. This isn't about him ruining us. It's about me choosing something for myself. For once. Choosing. I laughed bitterly. You're not choosing anything. You're being played. She raised an eyebrow, her expression smug. Oh, really? Is that what you think? Yeah, it is. Derek Stone doesn't do relationships. He does scandals. And when this gets out, because it will get out, he's gonna walk away without a scratch. Meanwhile, you'll be the villain in every headline. Emma shook her head, her voice calm and measured. It's not going to get out. I blinked. What? It's handled, she said simply. Derek has people who take care of these things. No one will ever know. You really believe that? I asked, incredulous. You think someone like him, with that much power and money, will protect you when things go south? I trust him, she said, without hesitation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I turned away, pacing the kitchen, trying to wrap my head around this madness. She wasn't just having an affair. She was delusional. She actually believed that Derek Stone would keep her safe, that he cared about her. I spun back around, my voice cold. What happens when he moves on, Emma? When you're no longer useful to him? What happens when his people stop returning your calls? Her expression wavered for a moment, but then she steeled herself. It's not like that. Then what's it like? I demanded. Tell me. I want to hear it. She hesitated, then said, It's real. Real. I laughed, shaking my head. You're living in a fantasy. You think you're special to him? You're not. You're just the next woman on his list. Her jaw tightened. You don't know him. No, I said, stepping closer. But I know men like him. I know how they operate. And I know that guys like Derek Stone don't fall in love. They manipulate. They control. And when they're done, they leave. Emma stayed silent, her eyes flicking toward the door. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was weighing her options, figuring out how to spin this in her favor. But I wasn't giving her that chance. You've burned everything to the ground, Emma, I said quietly. There's no coming back from this. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, but I cut her off. What's he giving you? I asked. What's so special that you'd throw away your family? She looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. Freedom. I stared at her, stunned. Freedom. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I've spent my whole life being the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect everything. But with Derek, I don't have to be perfect. I can just be me. I let out a bitter laugh. And you think he loves you? The real you? She nodded again. He does. My heart broke in that moment. Not because I still loved her, but because I realized she was completely lost. She wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying herself. There was a long silence before she finally spoke again. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. But I couldn't stay in that life anymore. I needed more. And what about Liam? I asked, my voice breaking. What about our son? Does he deserve this? To have his mother ripped away from him for some billionaire's midlife crisis. Tears slid down her cheeks. I'll always be his mother. No, I said coldly. You'll always be the woman who abandoned him. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I was done playing nice. I grabbed my jacket, heading for the door. Where are you going? She called after me. I didn't look back. To protect what's left of our family. Because clearly you won't. As I walked out into the cold night air, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Derek. I pressed play, his smug voice echoing through the speaker. Mike, I think we both know where this is heading. You can't win this fight. Emma's made her choice. Maybe it's time you make yours. I clenched my fists. This wasn't over. By the time I got to my car, Derek's words were still ringing in my ears. Maybe it's time you make yours. There was no mistaking his tone. That wasn't advice, it was a threat. The kind of threat that comes from someone who's used to getting what they want. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The rage bubbling inside me was volcanic, but I couldn't afford to lose control again. Not with someone like Derek Stone. He wasn't just a man, he was a machine with money, lawyers, and PR firms at his disposal. And somehow my wife was tangled up in his web. No, I thought bitterly. She wasn't tangled. She jumped right in. As I drove through the quiet streets, my mind spun. How did it get to this point? How did I go from a husband and father to this? Chasing my wife's lover through hotel lobbies. Listening to billionaires leave smug voicemails on my phone. Felt like my life wasn't mine anymore. Like someone had hijacked it and rewritten the script. I needed to get ahead of this. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit back and let Derek Stone run the show. If he wanted to play games, I'd play too. The next morning, I called in a favor. A guy I knew from college, Dave, worked in corporate security. He had access to information most people couldn't even dream of. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. Mike? It's been years, man. What's up? I need a favor, I said, cutting straight to the point. Off the record. Dave hesitated. This sounds serious. It is. What kind of favor? I took a deep breath. I need everything you can find on Derek Stone. His business dealings, his scandals, his weak spots. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Dave let out a low whistle. You're going after Derek Stone? Are you out of your mind? Probably, I admitted. But I don't have a choice. Jesus, Dave muttered. You know how dangerous that guy is, right? He doesn't just destroy people. He erases them. I know. And you're still going through with this? Yes. Dave sighed. All right, but you didn't get this from me. Give me a few hours. While I waited for Dave to call back, I paced the house like a caged animal. Emma hadn't shown up again, and I didn't know if that was a relief or an insult. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Dave. I've got something, he said. Go on. You're not going to like it. Trust me. I haven't liked anything in a long time. Dave sighed. Derek Stone's got a reputation for covering up affairs. But this one, it's different. He's not just messing around with your wife, Mike. He's invested. What the hell does that mean? It means he's been throwing money her way for months. Deposits to a private account in her name. He's been funding her. My stomach turned. What kind of money? Big money. Enough to make her financially independent from you. I leaned against the wall, my head spinning. He wasn't just having an affair with her, he was buying her loyalty. And there's more, Dave continued. Stone's gearing up for a major political move. He's been quietly building influence in Washington. This affair, it's a liability for him. Good, I muttered. Then I've got leverage. Careful, Mike, Dave warned. Guys like Stone don't play by the rules. If you push too hard, he'll bury you. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Derek Stone wasn't just some cheating billionaire. He was a man with an agenda. And Emma? She wasn't just a fling to him. She was a pawn. Or maybe a partner. Either way, I wasn't about to let him get away with it. That night, Emma texted me again. Emma, we need to talk. I'm coming over. I didn't respond, but I left the door unlocked. When she walked in, she looked different, confident, like she wasn't the woman begging for forgiveness a few days ago. Mike, she said softly, can we sit down? I nodded, gesturing toward the couch. She sat, crossing her legs carefully. Everything about her felt calculated, controlled. I know you're angry, she began, but you need to understand something. This isn't just about you and me anymore. No, I agreed. It's about Derek. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't deny it. Things have changed, she said slowly, and I've made my choice. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You've chosen him. I've chosen a future, she corrected. A future where I'm not dependent on anyone. Not you. Not anyone. I stared at her, stunned by the coldness in her voice. And what about Liam? What future does he have in all this? She faltered for a moment, then said, I'll always be his mother. No, I said quietly. You'll be the woman who left him for a man who's using you. Emma's expression hardened. Derek isn't using me. Yes, he is, I said, my voice steady. And when he's done with you, he'll toss you aside. Just like he's done with every woman before you. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You don't know anything about him. I know enough, I said. I know he's dangerous. And I know you're walking straight into a trap. She stood up, grabbing her purse. I didn't come here to argue. Then why did you come? I asked. To tell you that this is your chance to walk away, she said. Derek wants to keep things quiet. He doesn't want this to get messy. Messy? I laughed bitterly. It's already messy. Emma took a step closer, her voice low. Take the deal, Mike. Walk away. You'll be taken care of. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. You're bribing me? I'm giving you a way out, she said. A clean break. But there was nothing clean about this. No, I said firmly. I'm not walking away. And if Derek thinks he can buy me off, he's in for a rude awakening. Emma's eyes narrowed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder. I stood, towering over her. You brought this into our lives. You made it messy. And now you want me to just disappear. Her expression didn't waver. It's done, Mike. There's no going back. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. You tell Derek he doesn't scare me. And if he tries to come for me or my son, I'll make sure his perfect little empire burns to the ground. Emma stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out the door without another word. As she left, I realized something. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart anymore. It was war. After Emma left, I sat in silence, staring at the front door. My whole body was tense, like I was waiting for something to explode. She didn't even flinch when I told her I wouldn't back down. That wasn't my wife anymore. That was a woman carrying Derek Stone's confidence. The same cold, calculating arrogance I saw in his eyes when he said my name like he owned me. They thought they'd already won. They don't know who they're dealing with. The next morning, I took Liam to school. He was quiet in the car, clutching his backpack like it was a lifeline. Dad? He asked softly as we pulled into the drop-off line. Yeah, buddy? Is Mom coming home? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my throat tightening. I didn't know how to answer that. She loves you, I said carefully. No matter what happens. You know that, right? Liam nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed downcast. He wasn't buying it. He was old enough to sense when something was wrong. As he got out of the car, he paused, turning back to me. Will you be okay? I forced a smile. Of course. I've got you, don't I? He gave me a small smile before running off to join his friends. But as I watched him disappear into the school, that smile twisted into something darker inside me. Liam was the reason I couldn't let this go. The reason I wouldn't let Derek Stone win. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting what's left of my family. Later that afternoon, Dave called me back. You're not going to like this, he started. Give it to me straight, I said. There's a lot more to Derek's plans than just a political run. He's been maneuvering for years, setting up shell companies, buying off politicians, and, this is the kicker, he's been cleaning up scandals before they even hit the press. I frowned. What kind of scandals? Affairs, mostly. Bribes. Cover-ups. You name it. Dave's tone darkened. And he's got a fixer. A guy who makes problems disappear. Disappear how? Legally, if possible. Illegally, if necessary. I swallowed hard. You're saying he's dangerous. I'm saying he's the kind of guy who doesn't leave loose ends. And right now, you're a loose end, Mike. That night, I was sitting on the couch when I got another text from Emma. Emma, we need to meet. Tonight. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was this her? Or was it Derek pulling the strings again? After a long pause, I replied me. Where? We met at a park outside the city. It was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps lining the path. Emma was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, her hands folded in her lap. She looked tired, not the polished, confident woman I'd seen the night before. When she saw me, she stood up, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. Thanks for coming. I didn't bother with pleasantries. What do you want? She flinched at my tone but pressed on. This has gone too far, Mike. No, I said coldly. It went too far when you got into bed with him. Her jaw clenched. I made a mistake. Mistake. I laughed bitterly. You don't accidentally have an affair for 6 months. You don't accidentally let a man like Derek Stone control your life. Emma took a deep breath, stepping closer. You don't understand. Derek. He's not who you think he is. I know exactly who he is. I snapped. He's a manipulative bastard who's using you. And now he's trying to use me, too. Her eyes softened. No, it's more than that. What are you saying, Emma? She glanced around, like she was afraid someone was listening. Then she leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. He's not going to let you walk away. I stared at her, my heart pounding. What does that mean? It means... She hesitated, then said, he knows you're digging into his life, and he's not happy. So what? I said defiantly. What's he going to do? Ruin me? He's already done that. No, Mike. Her voice trembled. He doesn't ruin people. He removes them. I felt a chill run down my spine. You're in danger, she said, her eyes pleading. And so is Liam. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about the affair. Derek wasn't worried about the scandal. He was worried about what I knew. You have to stop, Emma begged. Please, for Liam's sake. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close to the truth. You made your choice, Emma, I said quietly. Now I'm making mine. Her face crumpled. Mike, don't do this. I'll do whatever it takes to protect our son. I turned to walk away, then paused. And if Derek comes near him, I'll bury him. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. You've been warned. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. The game wasn't over. It was just getting started. And now, the gloves were off that I sat in my car, staring at the text. You've been warned. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Derek Stone wanted me gone. Not just out of Emma's life, completely erased. He wasn't going to let me walk away from this without consequences. But he didn't know me. Not really. He didn't know the lengths I'd go to for my son. For the truth. You want to fight, Derek? You've got one. I fired up the engine and drove into the city, my mind racing with plans. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for Derek's next move. I was taking the fight to him. The next morning, I walked into Derek's corporate headquarters. The place was a fortress. Glass walls, armed security, and a front desk staff trained to smile politely while keeping people like me out. I strode up to the desk, ignoring the curious stares. I'm here to see Derek Stone. The receptionist blinked, confused. Do you have an appointment? No, I said flatly. But he'll want to see me. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm sorry, sir. But tell him it's Mike Carlson. I interrupted. Tell him I know everything. And if he doesn't want me walking into the press room downstairs, He'll see me. Now. Her eyes widened slightly, and she picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, I was standing in Derek's penthouse office. The view from the top floor was breathtaking. Glass windows overlooking the entire city, like he was a king surveying his kingdom. Derek sat behind a massive desk, perfectly composed, as if he wasn't the least bit surprised to see me. "Mike," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I didn't sit. I didn't even blink. I stood in front of his desk, my fists clenched. "Cut the crap, Derek. We both know why I'm here." He smirked, that same smug expression I'd seen in the hotel. "You're upset. I get it. But you're making a mistake." "No, you're the one who made a mistake." I shot back. "You underestimated me." He stood, walking around the desk, hands in his pockets. "Let's be honest, Mike. This isn't about Emma. This is about pride. Your ego got bruised, and now you want revenge." "Wrong." I took a step closer. "This is about Liam. You think you can destroy our family and walk away? Think again." Derek's expression hardened. "Families break up all the time. It's unfortunate, but it's life. Your marriage was over before I even came into the picture." "No," I said coldly. "You made sure it ended. And now you're trying to cover it up like you always do. But this time you messed with the wrong guy." Derek's smirk returned. "And what exactly do you plan to do, Mike? Go to the press? Leak the story?" He chuckled. "Do you have any idea how many journalists I own? By the time your story hits, it'll be spun so hard, you won't recognize it." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Maybe, but I don't need the press. I've got something better." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder. Photos, text messages, bank transfers, everything Dave had dug up. "Recognize these?" I asked, holding up the screen. For the first time, Derek's smile faltered. "You've been paying off politicians, covering up affairs, and bribing judges for years," I said. "I've got the proof. And if anything happens to me or my son, it all goes public." Derek's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing. Try me." The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You've backed me into a corner, Mike. I have to give you credit for that." "I don't want your credit," I said. "I want you out of our lives. For good." He paced for a moment, thinking. Then he turned to me, his expression cold and calculating. "Fine. I'll walk away," he said. "Emma's yours. I won't contact her again." I shook my head. "It's not just about Emma. It's about Liam. If I catch you near him, even once, I'll burn everything you've built to the ground." Derek studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Agreed." But I wasn't done. "One more thing," I said. "You're going to make Emma think it was your decision to cut things off. She doesn't get to play the victim in this." Derek smirked. "You really want her to hate me that much? She already chose you over her family. Now she gets to live with the consequences." I walked out of that office feeling lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. But as I reached the elevator, Derek called after me. "Mike." I turned. "You think this is over?" He smiled faintly. "It never really ends. People like me, we don't lose. We just wait." I met his gaze unflinching. "Then keep waiting. You'll be waiting a long time. It's funny how life works." A decade passed, and I didn't hear a word from Derek Stone. Liam grew up, stronger than I ever imagined. We made it through. But then one day my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in years. "Emma." I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, I picked up. "Mike," she said softly. Her voice was distant, older. "It's me." I didn't say anything. I need to talk to you." She sounded nervous, desperate. "Why?" I asked. There was a long pause. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. "It's about Derek. Some people never learn.